Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the podcast. Today, I'm going to be talking about how to make a pivot plan. We're going to be talking all about what being a six-figure CEO is and is not. So, a lot of myths around how you plan your time, and I want to break them all for you. Then we're going to talk about what you a pivot plan is and how to create one that works for you no matter what is going on with your life. And last but not least, I'm also going to teach you a prioritization tool called the implementation matrix that I have made, and it is based loosely off of the Eisenhower matrix if you are familiar with that. So, first and foremost, when we're thinking about creating a pivot plan, it is a necessity as a six-figure CEO to have a pivot plan. And the things that I need to bust some myths about, talk to you about with time management when it comes to being a six-figure CEO are things that are going to take you from 0 to 6 and multiple 6 to 7 figures. So a lot of times when I was thinking about what it would look like to be a six-figure, multiple six-figure, growing to 7 figure, I'm at 7 figures for all-time revenue, ATR, when I was thinking about that and becoming the kind of CEO that ran a business that was able to produce revenue at a very high rate, when I envisioned that in the time management behind it, I envisioned it like a tight run ship. I imagined that I was going to have a very set schedule every day. I imagined that I was going to have the time that I had when I was a growing to six-figure earner. When I was growing to 6 figures with my business, I had a gift of time. That is a gift that you are going to lose as your business grows because you're going to have more clients. So when I was growing and had a multiple 5 figure business when I was around like 50K, 70K, 80K, I had the ability to look at my calendar and do something that I've talked about in the planning module, which is Monday hour one and Friday hour done, where I would take time and I would evaluate my week, which I still think is really important. It's why I include it in my scaling systems mastermind. But it was something for me that I would sit down and I would be able to plan my week every week. I would be able to put in certain times when I would get my posts done. If I was doing a podcast, I had a certain day that I recorded my podcast, and my calendar felt neat and tidy and great. And then, as my business grew, as a six-figure CEO, what happened is the amount of time that I had to get these tasks done every single week dwindled because I was serving more clients. I have been fully booked since the end of 2022. So I have now had 3+ years of being fully booked with clients filling up my roster every week. There was pretty much throughout this year I've been on calls for around 30 hours a week. So 30 out of 40 hours of a work week is more than less. And when you're thinking about how to plan your time for that, you might think that you've got that perfectly planned out 10 hours that you're actually doing your work. And what I found in this past year is it really doesn't work like that. So if you have an idea that at 6 figures, your business is going to be completely organized and your schedule is going to be very routine. That is not the case. Most of the time, when you're growing to multiple 6 and 7 figures, your business actually doesn't end up looking very organized. It actually ends up looking very busy. You've got calls all the time. So, one of the reasons why I harp on systems so much is because it's about being able to snap in and out of a routine, being able to really shift gears quickly and fill hours that you have. This actually is a whole podcast inspired by a coaching call I was having with one of my clients who's going to be on the next podcast. But we were talking and she was saying, how do you get all this stuff done throughout the week? And I told her, I was like, oh, I had a coaching call. A client canceled. So immediately I had to record a podcast and get my post done. And she was like, how could you shift gears so quickly? And it's because through the systems that I have, through the routines that I've created, I literally would go through and I have like this neural pathway in my brain that's like, oh, podcast time. Here's my podcast brain. And I'm able to whip these out like it's nobody's business because I have systems. So I would not say that six-figure CEOs have a nice, neat little schedule that keeps them organized. I would say that six-figure CEOs have systems that help them throw out content and create things whenever they can. You also want to be able to crank out content whenever you can. You want to be able to go through, and if you have a free minute, you can be able to post something while you're inspired. So I want you to know that as you're growing as a solopreneur, having these systems, having these tools in order to create the actual success that you want is pivotal. It's not just a necessity to be able to pivot on a dime quickly with a busy schedule, but it also is that as time goes on, the same strategies that you use to grow your business might not work anymore. I know a lot of people that pre 2025 had businesses, and this is no shame to this strategy. It worked really well pre 2025, but they had this idea that they could let people come to them and they just had this one-to-many structure for their businesses. All they had to do was post. They didn't have to build any relationships in the DMs. And don't know how to pivot, and their businesses took a hit. And you need to be able to pivot in your routine. You need to be able to quickly create content, and you need to be able to pivot on your strategy. And that is what systems do. So when you're thinking about being a six and multiple six-figure CEO, your ability to pivot and change gears quickly is a necessity. It is one of the most important things for you to be able to do. And that's why if you can practice pre six figures and while you've got little bits of time at getting really good at just po- like getting a post out of thin air, being able to review your content really quickly, being able to change your strategy. That is something that's maybe been working for a while and have to pivot and change that. I remember this year, it's not just like about the one-to-many strategy. For me this year, we had to create a ton of different, like, kind of ideas for webinars, and we had to change the names for them a lot of different times to figure out something that stuck. And I thought that like the Q3 accelerator, I thought that that would be incredible. I thought that would be something that people would just really want, and it wasn't. But content to consults was. I thought that I forget even like six-figure strategy. I thought that would be a killer webinar, and the fully booked formula was better. So you have to be able, you can't be attached to your schedule. You can't be attached to your strategy. You can't be attached to plans because life is not going to go as planned. So I, first and foremost, when you think about how the world works, your thoughts create your results. So I want you first and foremost, before you even think about a pivot plan, is I want you to develop a sentence that can help you be a six-figure CEO that can pivot on a dime. And for me, my thought is six-figure CEOs pivot. Six-figure CEOs move quickly. And I want you to have those thoughts too. So think about if there's a different thought that serves you, feel free to go with that. But I want you to know that that is the most important element is not thinking that having a six-figure business looks like, oh, I'm going to come in and everything is just going to be ready and it's going to be tidy. You, if you think like that, your business is not going to do as well because you can't move as quickly. You can't change as quickly. So you've got to be a quick, adaptable CEO in order to hit six and multiple six figures. So that's the first piece of information for you is what it takes to be a six-figure CEO is the ability to pivot quickly. Now, within creating a pivot plan, this year has gone extremely different than I thought it would. I did not think I was going to be doing IVF this year. I also didn't even think I was going to be getting to ads this year. I knew I was going to get married this year, but that brought a lot more to-dos than one would have ever imagined. And within that, within this year, I've also gotten sick. I have felt terrible. Some days I got sick. I was going on trips. So it was like planned and unplanned things. There was the wedding and trips were planned. The ads, the ads, getting sick, doing IVF, all of that was not planned. So you need a pivot plan for planned and unplanned things that don't go exactly as you're thinking they will. And there's just going to be things that keep coming up. Again, the reason why I harp on systems is because if you can at least have a basic structure for your business, then you can check basic boxes and be like, okay, for my business to run, I just need to get some posts out, and it would be great if I could talk to some people. That's all I need. If I can have a system for that, if I can have a system for the way to make my business run, then you're going to be more successful. So there's going to be the list of regular to-dos that you're going to have to do every week. And not have to, but things that you want to do because you want to make sure that you are producing content consistently so that the algorithm doesn't think that you're a bot. Just important information for you to know. So if you don't have a system to get content out consistently, you're going to get swept up by the algorithm. If you don't have a way to reach out to people and have a DM, again, the algorithm is going to think that you're a bot and it's going to not post your content to people. So you need to have systems at minimum for those two things. That is a necessity. And there are going to be other things that you need systems for. Let's say you want to do a webinar. You got to have a system for that. Let's say you have to do your taxes. You got to make a system for that. There are lots of different things that you're going to have to do systems for in your business, and there's going to be business stuff and life that comes up as you go throughout your business. So what I do when I have a pivot plan, when I'm sick, for you guys, for the holidays that are coming up, if you've got family in town, if you've got holidays that you're celebrating, if you're going on trips, if you've got kids that are home from school, you need to have a pivot plan in place so that you know the minimum viable product MVP, what are you going to be getting out that is the basics, and make sure that you're consistent with that. And then you also need to have room for all the other random stuff that's going to be on your calendar. Like for me, getting my wedding invites, doing getting gifts for my bridal party, just random stuff that would come up. And I had to make a pivot plan for that. So here's what my pivot plan looks like. It's not glamorous, it's not pretty, and it's effective. So I don't care if you have the coolest, and I don't even know what CRM stands for. People are like all about some tech. You guys know I am really all about some basic stuff. I don't have fancy technology. I have Google Docs and Google Spreadsheets. So that is what works for me. Do what works for you. But CRM stands for Customer Relationship Management Software. And a lot of people have things like ClickUp, Asana, very fancy things to move their to-do schedule. I don't have that. I don't have that. I have a note in my phone. Feel free to do whatever works for you. I'm not hating on the CRMs or other fancy technology. But my pivot plan looks like this. I have a basic set for what my week looks like. I have client calls. That's number one. I always make sure that I'm on those calls. I rarely miss a call ever. Like in the years that I have been in my business, it rarely happens. So that's number one, serving my clients. Number two, one-to-many marketing. I make sure that I've got ways to get out my posts, my podcast, emails. These are the basics. That's the next thing. And then I make sure that I've got a way to talk to people online. Sometimes my VA takes that on for me, make sure she checks my inbox for me. Other times I do that myself. But you want to make sure that you've got just the basics in your calendar. You've got a time for those things to happen. But what happens is with the contact with customers and aka like talking to your followers on Instagram and with posting, those might be things that need to move. You also might have doctor's appointments. Your kid might get sick. So what I do is I make my best guess of like a typical plan for the week and I have that out as my weekly plan. And then inevitably things change. Things change week to week. And if I were to get so stuck in my coach taught a very traditional, like you have your calendar, you honor your calendar. If I had that and if I wasn't able to pivot every week, I would have a very unsuccessful business. So what I have to do is I make my plan for the week. I have it as a it's just like reoccurring things. Like I think that my podcast is supposed to be recorded on Tuesdays at 4. And guess what happens? Tuesday at 4, I might feel sick. A client might book a call. I might be on vacation. So I have to take it and I have to move it either with planned things. If I'm going out of town, I have to move all of the one-to-many marketing to the week prior, or I have to make a pivot plan. And in the moment, during the day, if I have, it's Monday and it's 2 o'clock and my 2 o'clock cancels, I can be able to move. I don't want you to be so rigid with your calendar that you don't move stuff. You just have to be like, oh, this is my pivot plan. I'm going to move my podcast from 4 o'clock on Tuesdays to 2 o'clock on Monday. And then you just have to be able to pivot and execute, pivot and execute, pivot and execute. Having a pivot plan stops you from when you have a client that cancels on a call, when you have a kid that's homesick, when you are going on a trip. You can pivot on a dime. You can get things done in advance so that you're not stressing for the future. And this is going to be so important because not only if you are traveling at all, if you're going to visit family, if you are more tired, not eating the way you usually do, and around other people, most likely you might get sick. That's just like inevitable. And I have clients that are like, well, I just wish that I was in this perfect energy and had this perfect schedule going, and you can't. You can't do that. You also, when you're thinking about your calendar, things are going to have to shift over the holidays. You're going to need to make shifts and sacrifices. If you talk to at least 10 people a day, maybe you work on that and you are like, okay, I can only talk to people on Tuesdays. I'm going to try and talk to 50 people on a Tuesday instead of 10 people every weekday. Pivoting is a necessity. And you can almost make like a tentative holiday pivot plan and be comfortable with even the holiday pivot plan not going as planned. You can make a sick kid plan and still be flexible that the sick kid plan might not go well. You could make a sick you plan and still be like, okay, it's like, yeah, it would be ideal that if I could get every post out on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and when I'm feeling sick, maybe I just have to post all of them on Friday. And that's fine. Okay. That's what it means to be a good six-figure CEO is your ability to pivot. And that's okay. So, what I do is I have a list of things that's in a note on my phone, and whenever I've got a dash of free time, a jolt of energy, I execute the plan. I imagine that's what's going to be like as a parent. I am not a parent yet, but when I'm a parent, I am guessing that's what's going to be like, where it's like, oh, the kid's down for a nap. The kid usually naps at 2 and it's 12. I've got to get something done. Let's get this done in the time that I have allotted. And it's going to just help you to be more successful as your business goes on. So, the last thing I want to tell you about in this podcast, all about pivot plans, is about your ability to prioritize. So, this is something I actually use with my one on one clients, and it's called an implementation matrix. And this is something that I've used for my clients all over. In fact, one of my clients who was on the podcast previously, she does so much. So, and I'm going to just like brag about Amy for a second. Amy Gorin, who is one of my amazing clients who was on the podcast earlier. She runs this incredible, like multiple six. It was at 455K last year. I'll have her on the podcast to tell you how much it's grown this year. It's pretty significant. And within that, she has a team of 20. She also she runs live in-person events. She has just had her maternity leave, has come back from her maternity leave, is launching her group program, and with that, there's a lot of things that need to be done for a business like that. So, for you, if you're encountering a stage of life where there's a lot of things that need to be done, for me with my wedding, same deal. I had to prioritize things and be very judicious with my time, which meant for me, I couldn't just mess around and like just remember things when they need to get done. Usually that's what I'll do is like I'll have the set things in my calendar and I'll be like, "Oh, and I also need to get this one other thing done and I need to call the doctor and make an appointment." And I can usually get it done within the blocks that I have. Again, during usual time, you would actually plan out your schedule. I have a whole thing about planning your schedule about Monday hour 1. I think it's episode 4 of the podcast. Go back and listen to it if you're in like a more stable time. But if you're in a crazy time of life, sometimes you need a pivot plan and you need to prioritize like week of, and you need to be like, okay, here's all the things that we have to do. We just have to get this done right now. So the implementation matrix is done by value and time. Values on the y-axis and yes, and time is on the x-axis. And there are four categories that are in the implementation matrix based on the Eisenhower matrix. There's do, decide, delegate, delete. That's how the quadrants work. And I'm going to include, of course, a worksheet that goes along with this podcast that you could actually fill out your own implementation matrix. But what I would recommend in super crazy times of life, whether it's the week before a big event like a wedding, or whether it's just like, okay, we've got a huge to-do list, that's when you use an implementation matrix. And it was something I use with my one-on-one clients as well. And what you're going to do is the things that are high value, low time, schedule a time to do them quickly. Then the things that are low time, low value but low time, then you want to decide a time for those to get done. And I have decide and delegate as like kind of like two different categories. You'll see them on the worksheet if you download it. But you either want to decide at a later time when it's going to get done, or you want to delegate it to somebody else. For me, there were things for my wedding that I was like, I would love to do, and I'm not going to do. So, like getting the PJs washed, I was like, hey, mom, this would be a great thing for you to handle. If you could handle this, that would be great. So I had to delegate those things to people. And I use implementation matrices for life things and for business stuff. I combine my to-do list for both things because if I have two different to-do lists and then things get really chaotic. So you want to decide or delegate for the things that are high time, but also high reward. Also decide and delegate. Schedule an actual time to get those things done. Like, um, I think that one of my other clients had to ship something to a different state. So for you, like if that's something that we know needs to get done, we prioritize it and we actually decide a time for it to get done. Then the last time, the things are high time, low reward. Those are things that you want to delete for now. So for me, things that I had to choose, like I, of course, would love to get thank you notes out as soon as possible. And what I had to delete for the month of October were thank you notes. I was like, yeah, this would be awesome if I could get it done. And I know I'm going to work on them probably in mid to late November. And that's okay. I can delete that for now and prioritize the things that are most important to me. So, for you, quick recap of the podcast. First and foremost, when we're thinking about being a six-figure CEO, six-figure CEOs are not rigid, they are not set, they are flexible and adaptive to their environment. The second thing we talked about is creating a pivot plan, having a list of things to do, and being flexible enough to fill it in where you need to be. And of course, if you have situations where you're at low energy or low time, you might have to delete some things, and that's okay. And then last but not least, if you're in an extra special, crazy time of life with a lot of to-dos, that's when we whip out a solid implementation matrix and you go ahead and get those things done, prioritize so that you can be as productive as possible in the most efficient amount of time possible. So I hope this Pivot Plan podcast was extremely helpful for you. It has literally been what I've been living for the past couple, honestly, not even just for this year, but for the past 2 years. It's been a necessity to be able to have a pivot plan like this just because things have been really crazy. And it's okay for you to go through crazy phases of life. It's okay for life to just always be crazy. And you also want to be able to feel comfortable with a pivot plan to make things work. If you have any questions about the worksheet, make sure you reach out to me. And I can't wait to see you oh so soon.